this community particularly is made up of rental property investors. What are some of the tasks that you think people from my community might commonly hire someone to take off their plates?
Yeah, definitely. So it's say if you're in the STR space or the short-term rental space, I mean, as everybody finds out when they buy their first rental property and get it on VRBO and Airbnb, you very quickly own a hotel, right?
Yeah.
Customer service. Like there's one thing when you have a long-term renter and there's a plumbing issue, right? They got to live there. They're going to take care of it. They're going to help you through it. When you've got someone who's got a 3-day vacation and all of a sudden there's a leak all of a sudden you just wrecked a core memory, right? And nobody wants that. So a big thing in the short-term space is just a lot of the client, resident relation type communications. So whether it's like managing your posts, managing your listings across all your platforms or within your booking CRM, all the back and forth communication. We have lots of clients that they'll do courtesy calls, right? To 24 hours prior to check-in, walk through kind of hey, what to expect, where to go, where to eat. Just that type of like when you really want to create that experience so you can get the 5-star review and hopefully get another booking, just all that really, time conducive communication pieces on the long-term side, both in single family as well as multifamily. I mean, we made a hard pivot about 3 years ago to focus more on the management side of it, just because so much operationally that happens when you're running a property management company, regardless of scale. It could be five properties. It could be 50,000 doors. I mean, a lot of it is, CRM, customer, leasing administration type work. So the big two that a lot of our clients start in on the leasing side is like a leasing administrator. So, everyone's got a good leasing agent, or maybe they have their property manager that also has a certain leasing component. Well, it's always the paperwork piece that slows it down. Well, you pay for technology. You don't have to be sitting there locally in order to, put somebody through a tenant screening, or in order to set move-in dates, move-out dates. So all of that leasing administrative piece, we find great success with our VAs. And then obviously anything on the maintenance side, both from the resident relations side, fielding tickets, calls, getting back to people, checking in on progress of work, and then also on the vendor management side, right? Just all of that from getting the initial inquiry all the way through to job completion and vendor paid. There's 100 different steps, right? It's the same steps every time, but it really, that's, the hardest part for what we find a lot of managers to scale that, where they typically are asking a lot of their property manager, to handle a lot of those touch points, whereas we can complement them, get them a more affordable resource in the form of a VA to take on a lot of that and enhance the experience, create a better experience, get paid faster, get the proper paperwork out of your vendors, and handle, the 500 touch points that it takes when somebody files one work order.
Yeah. And what's the line for a task that makes it more like, as we've moved away from like the Industrial Revolution where you're doing the exact same thing every day, a worker's hired to like just push a button or whatever, and they're doing the same thing. And we move more into like the information economy where it's like you get paid for being thoughtful and being able to think deeply and creative, and so those two ends of the spectrum, I think there's like a middle ground, I think, where I've struggled with, where it's like, does a task cross the line to where it's too creative to assign to somebody else? And it because like you said, like it could just be a maintenance thing that comes up, but then it requires maybe thinking through like the other aspects that are going to be impacted by a decision that's made. Like every time there's a decision made, there's other people, other workers within the company. The bigger the company, probably the more secondary impacts are going to occur. So how do you decide where that line is and which work to assign to a virtual assistant and what to keep on your own plate?
Yeah. And I think maybe even just taking a step back, because it's something we hear a lot, like how much can they do? Right. And I get why people ask that, but I mean, that's a tough question to answer. You know what I mean? Because just from us, from a recruiting standpoint, we're recruiting people that are 3 years removed from college. We're recruiting people that are 20 years removed from college who have managed teams and operationally. So for us, when it comes to actually plugging somebody into that seat, it's always on a case-by-case basis. It's like, what are you looking for? That's why we go through that process mapping to really scope out, like, is this more of an operational role, or is this more of like a strategy, like problem solver type role? And then we fit the correct person. What I'll say is a lot of people try to hand off, especially if I'm sure this resonates with some of your listeners, if they've tried to hire before, the way VAs are sold as the magic button, right? Get a VA, your life's
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah.
They try to unload too much. What I will say, kind of our methodology is we like to start and have very concise glide paths for the roles and responsibilities when the person starts. And a lot of what our clients leverage our VAs for is the operational side of it, right? Those tasks that need to be done day in, day out, the leasing administrative process, the maintenance coordination, the following up with vendors, the account reconciliations. Like that's the type of stuff that we love to start with a client, especially when they're new, because that's the stuff that A, is probably falling off the table or falling between the cracks right now. And B, it's where the VA can have a lot of impact. They can really jump in. Now, and I'm kind of going to play both sides of the fence here. We have clients that have had VAs for 4, 5, 6 years through us. Where, I mean, I was just talking to one of the clients last week at a convention. They've got 2 VAs. One's their VP of operations. The other one is their director of operations, and they make decisions. But that came with time. It came with understanding, how their company worked. So what I will say is VAs are just like any other employee. I'll say if you're trying to hire a strategy mind, I typically tell people hire that locally, just because from local market nuances, obviously maybe for you as the owner wanting to have somebody there close, right, that you can work on strategy, don't look to hire VAs for that. But right out of the gate, all of the operational tasks kind of base work that's very regimented, that's stuff that VAs can come in and crush. And then keep in mind, treat your VA just like any employee. Those VAs are going to grow with your company. They're going to want to take on more. I mean, for those of you that aren't familiar with kind of Filipino culture, like super hardworking people, eager to learn. And what happens there is a lot of our clients move that VA up through their organization. So from the beginning, I like to keep things in a very tight box in terms of, hey, I need you to do these 7 things, and here's how we do it. But through the same coaching, mentorship, having them integrated with your team, they certainly, can take on more to where they can be those decision makers that we're all looking for.
And do most people start with one? Well, I guess how do you decide when it is time to hire somebody? Like, how do you know that it's the tipping point that you should bring someone on? And then do most people start with one? And then how do you see them progress over the years? Does it very quickly grow into multiple?
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's always on a case-by-case basis. For us, part of going through that process mapping is part of what our process development team does as we're scoping out these roles. And this is just having, the longevity in the industry that we have. We can look at, let's just use the maintenance coordinator position again. We can look at that and be like, how many tickets, how many filings, vendors that they manage, how many doors you have under management. And really, before we even get on that first process call, we can say, hey, this is probably going to need 2 people or a full-time and a part-time person. And that's just kind of knowing the numbers and the workload that comes from how many doors or how many properties that you manage. But no, it's very normal for us where somebody gets on a call looking for, hey, I just want we offer a part-time option. So, hey, I think I just need someone for 20 hours a week. And they kind of get on, with maybe having read the 4-Hour Workweek or a book like that. And they're like, yeah, I just need them to answer some emails, maybe get through some lease agreements and send out some renewal contracts. That's it. And then very quickly they go through our process and they start to kind of uncover, well, I'm also not doing that, or, ooh, I forgot to do this, or it'd be great if I could enhance this experience. How do we do that? And our team walks them through that. And then, I mean, the biggest thing I think is kind of the aha moment. And keep in mind, we've all gotten a lot more used to this platform, right? The Zoom running our world. But I think before, a lot of it was you get on, you go through interviews. For us, we bring you candidates where you get to pick from a pool. So we kind of bring you varying skill sets, experience, personality types, all custom matched to your role, but really kind of giving you options so that you can fit them into the culture that you want. And I mean, really for us, it's usually once you get through that first couple weeks where they're like, oh, wow, okay, this is just like hiring somebody in the office and they totally get this. And here, take this on, here, do more. It's a natural kind of progression once it becomes tangible and real, where a lot of clients start to finally realize A, this is way more efficient to operate like this. And then B, given the support of having the process documentation and having our management teams there, it just becomes so much more easy to hire, or so much easier to hire than it would, when you typically got to go to Indeed and create a job description and all that stuff that it takes to hire somebody locally by yourself.
Got it. Yeah. And what is that process mapping process, to be meta, what does that look like in terms of like time that it takes and the process of that? And then what does the train up look like once you select a team member?
Yeah, definitely. And I think just bigger picture, if anybody's looking to hire VAs themselves, don't disregard scoping out the work, the role, what you want them to do and how you want them to do it. And that takes on many forms. It can literally be, hey, if you want them to do, I don't know, you're a bookkeeping, an accounts payable function, like record yourself doing the work, ledgering the counts, going through the GL codes that you want matched up. Like always have something. Don't rely on yourself to be the trainer, because A, that doesn't really free you up from doing the work that you're hiring the person to do. But then B, we've all been students before. We've all sat there in a lecture hall and the teachers describe something on the whiteboard or the chalkboard, depending on how old you are. And we've said, oh, that makes sense. And then we go to lunch and we go out to dinner and all of a sudden we have a test the next week and you're like, we don't remember anything. Right. So having that resource material allows them to self-study and it gives them points of reference. But for us, typically like time span when you're hiring with us, it's typically going to be about 2.5 weeks to go from first mapping call to VA starting to work for you. And over the course of that time, usually we're spending about 2 to 5 hours on live calls with you to help scope this out for you. And I think for a lot of people, there's almost like this fear around like, hey, I'd rather just have someone and plug them in and let them go figure it out than me have to like sit here and like write out each step and what I want them to do and how I find these resources. So we make it really easy for our client. We literally sit on there and it's almost like an interview. You're working with, if you're a short-term property or for short-term property manager, you'll work with a team who specializes in STR. So regardless of what platform you're utilizing, regardless of your technology stack, regardless of how many doors you have, you're working with a team that knows, hey, if you need this position, here's the 7 things that, most property managers need and that we're going to need to get out of you in order to create that process. So it's literally led by us. We go through and walk through step by step on that video recording. So like I said, a couple calls, about an hour and a half each. And then what our team's typically doing, we're typically spending about 30 to 40 hours actually doing the documentation, creating video training, checklists for every action item, and really formalizing that video, that interview that we did to get the process out of you, and creating beautiful SOPs and checklists and training documentation, all built custom to you that then you get to keep and retain for forever. So we try to make it very easy, just because coming from our experience, we know how for some people, like the documentation, like that's what they don't have time for, right? The number of calls I get on, Kirby every week where someone's like, how are your processes? Are they done? Oh yeah, we've been working on that. Like everyone's always working on it, right? We've got a team that knows the industry, knows your businesses, and will very quickly be able to hone in on exactly how you're operating. And then more importantly, they're the ones that have the time to organize it in such a way that the uptraining of your VA is very pain-free for everybody involved.